If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all three books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and as we move into episode 8 of Godzilla Singular Point, I've realized something about our two main characters, Yun and Mei, that I think I always kinda knew, but it didn't really hit me until this episode. It started with Mei and Pello 2 going through Ashihara's notes in his private library because they'd just been explained about how he had this computer that could see through time, just accept it, and that it was predicting some sort of catastrophe in the future. And Mei has this line, and maybe this is just something in the dub, but assuming it's accurate, she says, "We're trying to figure out a disaster, but we don't even know what the disaster is." My first thought was, that's a good question, Mei. I'm just spitballing here, but it may have something to do with the giant freaking monsters that are attacking everywhere. That might be a starting point. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, Mei doesn't actually have anything to do with the monsters, does she? I don't think she's really been directly involved in any of that since the series began. Which then made me realize, holy crud, Mei and Yun switched places at some point. Not physically, but in terms of what they're capable of. First couple of episodes, we learn what their expertise is. Yun is the guy who deals with recognizing patterns and predicting the future and the theoretical physics, if you will. Not necessarily directly that, but sort of in that direction. And with computers and whatnot. Mei's specialty, meanwhile, is Biologica Fantastica, which essentially means in this context, or as they've been putting it, impossible animals. Creatures that are just so bizarre and contrary to what we know in nature, and how she's able to study these things, I don't know, but she does it anyway. Now, you would think, based on that Yun would be the one investigating stuff about the archetypes, whereas Mei would be the one involved with the monsters. But it's the opposite. Even after they established that in those first couple of episodes, Mei is the one dealing with predictive models of the future and computers, while Yun is always involved with the monsters and figuring out how they function. How does that happen? How do you get that so cross-wired? And, well, you know what? I know exactly how it happens. It happens when you don't bother making your characters fully fleshed out realistic people. You just make them mouthpieces for whatever scientific concepts you want to throw into the show, and as a result it doesn't matter who says what, as long as somebody says it. Ergo, the two characters wound up switching roles. And this could easily be solved if you simply switched what their specialties were, have Yun be the monster expert from the beginning and Mei be the computer expert from the beginning, but that's not what they did. It's amazing to me that it happens. Instead of these two having very distinct fields of expertise, instead, they are just experts in science. What kind of science? Doesn't matter what kind of science, because it's all the same, apparently. If you can mix chemical compounds, you can build a robot. If you can program a computer, you can perform brain surgery. It's all the same. As long as it sounds smart, it's science, and science can just be applied to anyone who's smart enough. That's how it works in Dexter's laboratory, so that must be how it works all the time, right? Like I said, I think I always kind of knew it. I did think it was a little weird way back in, I believe, episode 3, when Mei showed a complete lack of interest in the Rodans, despite this being exactly what she would be looking for. Somebody says, like, don't the Rodans fall into the category of impossible animals? And she's just like, well, they exist, so that makes them possible, and never says another word about the monsters again. You would think she'd be waiting for this, but instead she shows a complete lack of interest, and, well, that's just bad writing, no matter how you look at it. And like I said, it was easily solved. They could have just switched it earlier, instead of switching it a certain way into the story itself. This is just... Like I said in the last episode, I'm considering the human cast completely wasted at this point, and there's going to have to be a miracle that brings me back into caring for them. But as Yoon himself said, miracles rarely occur. That's what makes them miracles. So I'm not necessarily expecting a miracle to pull me back into the caring about these characters here. Now, there is something else I have to say regarding the characters, but it has more to do with the plot than it does the individuals. So, I'll get to that in a moment, but first, I have to address the monster side of things as well. So as noted, Godzilla Amphibia, aka Varan, is on land at this point. He starts off at the beginning of the episode on land, the military's attacking him, and then a scene from Shin Godzilla happens. Literally, even some of the camera angles are the same. The difference is that Godzilla looks like Varan in this context, and instead of a radioactive heat ray, Varan blasts a beam of intense cold that somehow still causes a fiery explosion. Biologica Fantastica, whatever. But it literally is a scene from Shin Godzilla. Godzilla Amphibia is getting attacked, so he spams a brand new attack and then decides to take a nap. The main difference in terms of how he takes a nap is that instead of just freezing in place, he's now inside a crystalline cocoon, and he's gonna come out looking different afterward. Someone in the comments of the previous video said that the reason Godzilla went from being Aquatilus to Amphibia so quickly is because being connected to the red dust and manipulating reality, he's just rapidly changing. Okay, if I accept that he can change that rapidly, then why does he need a cocoon to change into the next stage? It feels like the rules are being sort of made up as they go along, because they had to sort of work backwards in order to justify a transforming Godzilla in the first place. And other than that, he really doesn't do anything. He spends the rest of the episode just sort of encased in glass. And I assume he's gonna come out in the next episode in his next form, which I'm kinda dreading based on how the figures looked, but we'll talk about that when it actually happens. Then, of course, at the end we have Jet Jaguar battling the Kumanga, and the Kumanga look good enough, like a combination of Kumanga and Megalon, and I don't necessarily have any complaints about their portrayal. They do show up out of nowhere, but that's just par for the course in this series. There's a monster over there, and now there's a monster over there. That's just the way it goes. And for some reason, when the creatures are killed, their blood turns into Hedorah, or whatever the name is for this creature that's not Hedorah but totally looks like Hedorah. And then the episode just ends. Like, we get an action scene, the scene is clearly not done, and then suddenly the credits roll. That's another thing this series has kind of had an issue with. The episodes kind of stop suddenly. I get that it's long-form storytelling and you want to leave on a cliffhanger so you can have a reason to come back, leave the audience wanting more, if you will, or give them a reason to binge all the way through, which I'm clearly not doing. But I don't necessarily think that justifies the way it's done, because you need to actually sort of ease them into it, otherwise you get whiplash. But the fight itself, I don't necessarily have an issue with, and Jet Jaguar looks so much better with legs that actually are proportioned to the rest of him, like I keep saying. And he moves much better too. Why didn't Bandai just make a figure of that version? Well, not that it really matters, I guess. Beyond that, though, There isn't really a whole lot that happens in this episode other than, again, more technobabble, more talking about stuff that's going on, and high concept scientific ideas and theories and things like that. It just sort of goes along as it always has and doesn't really seem to have much of a sense of urgency. And that actually brings us to my main issue with the plot of this episode, and in fact, an issue that's becoming apparent for the series as a whole. I didn't mention it in the last couple of videos because it left that little of an impact on me, but the monsters have been spreading all over the world. The Rodans are popping up in the Americas and Europe, and now the Mandas are appearing in those locations as well. And they bring the red tide and red skies with them, and it's all supposed to be a very harrowing experience, but honestly, this is the least harrowing apocalypse I have ever seen in fiction. And it's not because the events themselves aren't, like, thrilling in theory. It's more because of how the characters are responding to them, or rather not responding to them. The characters don't do anything in this series with any real sense of urgency. There are monsters popping up everywhere, and they're destroying cities, and they're disrupting daily life, but Jet Jaguar still has time to play a game with a trio of kids whose parents are nowhere to be seen, and since these kids are allowed to wander free in the vicinity of a dead sea serpent, that must mean that people don't think there's that much danger to be found in this area. Moreover, May and Dr. Lee have been doing some globetrotting, and they are in areas where the Rodans and Mandas are attacking or encroaching, and the worst that's happened to them so far is that one of their flights got canceled and they had to find an alternate means of transportation. That's it. Not even when they're on a boat and the Mandas pass right in front of them is there any disruption to their travel. And they just sort of go along at a leisurely pace, you know, take a nice relaxing drive through the countryside, take your time getting out of the car and entering Ashihara's home and walking to his private library. It's not like time is of the essence and the world is about to end or anything. That's not really getting me drawn into these events. All they're doing this whole time is just walking around and spouting technobabble, and it's not even important walking with a purpose. And this is not an issue of the dub. It's not like you have characters running with concerned looks on their faces, but they're talking like someone's just reading lines off of a page. No, they're just walking along casually or driving along casually. There's no real sense that they're in any rush because time is of the essence. That's a problem. It again speaks to how it feels like this story doesn't really care about its human characters. And the human characters, by extension, don't seem to care about anything around them. Take one of those scenes of May, Dr. Lee, and Pello 2 going to Ashihara's house and show it to someone completely out of context. Other than the fact that one of those characters is a little R2-D2 looking robot, they might think it's a scene from a slice of life anime. And heck, the presence of a robot might not even dispel that notion. This is anime we're talking about, after all. But the thing is, that's not how it ought to be. I honestly can't think of another Godzilla movie where the characters are acting with a lack of urgency the way they are in Singular Point. In the scenes that are before the kaiju attack and show up and start doing stuff, maybe you get those scenes. But when the kaiju are actually there and doing stuff, that's when your focus has to be on more than just sort of sauntering around. That's when you've got to move with purpose. And the characters just aren't really doing that. I don't know, it feels like they don't care. And so far I've been given no reason to think that they do. Like I said, the writer just seems to use them as mouthpieces for whatever scientific concept he wants to throw in. So why should they care? The only purpose they serve is to spout jargon. They're not characters. That's an issue. That is a big issue with this. In the comments of my more recent videos on this series, I've seen people assuring me that the show gets better. It's going to pick up. I think at this point I'm completely justified in asking, when? when is the series going to get better? And assuming that it does start getting better, why should it even be in a position where it has to get better? Because it's been on a steady downward trajectory this whole time. It started off well enough. I was into the first few episodes and I wanted to see where it went. And then it just was all downhill from there. Ideally, you want a series to start in a good area and then get better. At the very least, you want it to remain on the same level of quality as how you started out. But this has just been going downhill. So when is it going to get better? And why should it even have to get better? Why couldn't it have been good the whole way through? The finale had better deliver on the monster action, because at this point that's the only thing that could possibly save it. What I observe usually in monster movies is that when the human side of it fails, the monster side should be able to make up for it. And if the monster side doesn't make up for it, then the whole thing is just bleh. And so far, the monster stuff has been better than the human stuff in Singular Point, but there also hasn't been all that much of it. And some of the monster stuff is even feeling like it's not that good anymore. Wasted Titanosaurus, wasted Varan. Heck, you wasted them the moment you decided to just make them proto-Godzillas. But even the kaiju stuff that hasn't been wasted is still kinda losing its appeal. It doesn't feel like it has anything beneath it, really. It just is sort of there. Almost like it's trying to distract us from how the characters are so flat. Well, again I ask, when does it get better? If it's getting better, it's gotta get better soon, because we're running out of time. There are only so many episodes left, and if it doesn't pick up soon, then... well, onward to episode 9. Maybe that's where it gets better. But I'm not holding my breath. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.